Good morning, everyone. We have gathered here for the book launch of All Stray Dogs Go to Heaven, authored by Krishna Candeth. I am Ayushi Jain from BluOne Inc., and I welcome you all for this event. This therefore speaks about the importance of the event, our interest in the book, since it's happening on the Saturday morning, and all of us, it seems houseful. For the event, I would request, I would invite Vadhanji. Sai Vadhan, known by the pen name of Vadhan, is a talented Indian novelist known for his captivating works in the thriller and fantasy genres, heavily influenced by Indian mythology. With 4 published books under his belt, Vadhan aims to bring to light the mysteries and wonders of India through his literary creations, one thrilling story at a time. His writing style includes unexpected twists, turns, and surprising endings that leave his readers hooked and engrossed till the very end. His books are a testament to his incredible storytelling abilities, making them a must read for anyone who loves an unputdownable thriller. Thank you for being here, sir. We also have the author of All Stray Dogs Go to Heaven, Krishna Candeth. Krishna Candeth was born in Kerala. He studied English literature at Madras University and filmmaking at Columbia University, New York. He has made short films and documentaries, and his poetry has been published in England and in the United States. All Stray Dogs Go to Heaven is his first novel. He now lives in Colombia. Thank you for being here, sir. I'm sure we all want to hear you about the book, so I'll pass on the mic to you for some words on the book.
You should never ask an author what he thinks about his book, because he really doesn't know. All writers are liars. They tell artistic lies, and they persuade you to believe those lies. Is that okay? Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. So as I was saying, yeah, novels are lies. They're good artistic lies told by artistic liars who are authors. What can I say? A book is like a door. I mean, you open a door and you go through, and there are people waiting for you on the other side. Sometimes, you get to know them, you get to be fond of them, and it's a little journey. At other times, you just slam the door shut and you don't read the book. But books serve many purposes. I know somebody who's been reading the same book for 10 years, and every night he reads about 3 pages, and by the time he gets to the 4th page, it's lights out and he's fast asleep. So books can be good sedatives too, I mean, if you want to look at it as such. Anyway, so much for books. Talking about this particular book, I began to write it at a time when I was trying to raise money for a documentary that I was doing. And I'm hopeless at raising money, so at some point I had to give it up and sit down, and I decided to write a book. It took a very long time, well, I mean, comparatively about 4 years, and I'm glad to see it through, to finally bring it to a desirable end. So that's how it got started. Yeah. And I should also say that I'm extremely grateful to BluOne Inc. For having published this book, because it was really long to begin with, over 700 pages. And the editor and I sat down and cut it down to a reasonable length. Even it was about 500 odd pages, and the publishing company decided to go ahead and publish it. So that's very rare these days. So I salute them and thank them. Yeah.
Thank you, sir, for still saying some few words about the book. I think this calls for a formal launch of the book. I would request Vadhanji and Krishnaji to please formally launch the book. You just unwrap that? All Stray Dogs Go to Heaven by Krishna
Don't block
Candeth.
this. Don't block with your
Oh.
fingers. Hold it like this. Yeah, so the name is not wrong.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Thank you, Vadhanji and Krishnaji.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I would now pass on the mic to Vadhanji and say something about the book.
So I was just telling Krishna when I met him just now that there are some books which are good, some books which are great, some books which are grand, some books which are spectacular. But you don't hardly come across a book that's exquisite. In the sense that every word in it, every sentence that is formed is based on the, the feelings, the perspectives, the various thoughts that flow through the mind of an individual, not necessarily only the author, though it is the author also. And it is something that's wonderful. The moment I started reading the book, this sense of exquisiteness, the way in which he has set out his literary journey came to mind. So he said that he's put his everything into the first book. I said, hold on, there are other books to come for you. And you will definitely be in need of more of these really wonderful ways in which you have to depict something. Now, this is a heavy book. Let me tell you that this is not a light read. This is not something that you will read, during the train journey of 5 hours and then, leave the book back in the train and move on. This is a collector's item. This is a heavy book. But it has been set out so beautifully that the heaviness completely dissipates. It's like mist, and you start falling into the perspectives of the author, and you start walking the journey with him. The most important part, to me as an author, in a book is that it should be a moving picture in your mind. That when you read the book should be playing in your mind, and if you are able to achieve that, then your book's a success. And that's exactly what happened to me when I was reading All Stray Dogs Go to Heaven. The characters came to life. I could see the forests. I could see the Mumbai. I could see the riots in Calcutta. I could see so much in my mind's eye when I read this book. And that is what was wonderful. I'd like to take this opportunity to read a couple of things from the book, and just to tell you what I think. Just give me a moment, please. So there's this one particular passage. It comes pretty early in the book. It's on page 5. It goes like this: the mind and speech have spent the night free of each other, are now separate and rested. There is no need to rush and yoke them quickly back together again. The gods, they say, dwell silently in the mind. It's the demons that wish to speak. So stay the breath. Don't allow it to lapse mindlessly into speech. Yes, that's the first word in the morning. That first word in the morning must not be careless. It must be voluntarily and deliberately spoken. From now on until the last day of my life, if the ability to speak is what separates me from other forms of life, then I must reassure myself every morning of the ingenuity of that state. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. I mean, in the sense that it brings out that wonderful idea in your mind that, hey, just when you wake up in the morning, what you say really matters. What you feel and what you think really matters, and maybe it gives direction to how the rest of your day goes. Whether it's good or bad, or whether it's happy or sadness, or whether it's intelligent or dumb. That first word, where the mind and the speech again come back and start working together, that's very important. And I think that it's a beautiful way of saying things. How did you do this?
I think that paragraph is followed by another one which quotes the Roman philosopher Seneca and says, the character spends time in bed pre-meditation. I mean, that's the word that Seneca uses. And premeditation is a way of just lying quietly in bed, thinking of the day ahead of you, and thinking of all the disappointments that might arise during that day, and how to deal with that disappointment and carry your life forward, and not to worry too much about what you want to do. So I mean, that the whole idea of premeditation. I mean, how did I write it? I didn't sit down and say, now I will write a paragraph about things to say in the morning. No, these things just, sometimes there are things you want to say, and half the battle is trying to find the right words to say it, to put one word after another, and somehow, eke out a sentence that sounds right. That's really half the battle.
So sir, there are so many paragraphs that I had marked in this book that from the beginning and on. The way it's structured is that you have these larger chapters, and within each of these chapters you have these sub-chapters, and each of these sub-chapters have their own titles. And I think what he's achieved with that is that he's broken up his thought flow so well, so meticulously. And each thought flow has its own subtitle. And he's been able to express that very clearly, instead of, jumbling the whole thing together and, where the reader probably might get lost, because there are so many ideas, so many flows that come in. Now, what would you, yes, when an author sits down to write, he's not really writing, it flows through him. I understand that bit, but the structuring of the book and the breaking up of these chapters and sub-chapters, what made you do that?
I can't remember who it was who said that you don't write as the crow flies. You don't go in a straight line from one point to another. The great thing about the form of the novel is that it absorbs everything. It's the very structure, the form of the novel allows it to take in everything. It just, it accumulates, it absorbs, it expands, it digresses, it does all kinds of wonderful things. And that's because that's the form of the novel. You can't do that with any other structure. And talking about this particular book, I conceived of the book as with subheadings. I didn't think of it as chapters. I don't know why. That's the way it came to me. The editor was working with me, said that's a form that you use in non-fiction, not much in fiction at all. But I insisted that we keep that structure, because that was how I had conceived the book, with subheadings. So the whole form of the book is episodic, So I guess in a way it was easy to edit the book, because you just had to lop off episodes, because it was a problem cutting down 700 pages. But it was easier because because of the structure, and it's some people will say, oh, it's a lot of stories strung together, but they're stories strung together, but they are stories strung together not through plot, but through feeling. It's the feelings of the characters that drive each subheading. So I didn't really think too much about, how I'm going to take the book straight through to the end. I was thinking more about expanding the book as I go along. And I think that's something I like, and that's something the novel accepts, the fact that you you can put anything into a novel. And instead of thinking of the plot, I think I thought more about the feelings of the characters involved.
A very different form of writing and a very different presentation of the way in which you wanted to express your thoughts. To take me, I am a thriller writer. I write thrillers and I read thrillers. So I like my books to be fast-paced. I like my books to be very tight. And then when Lipika asked me to read this book, I said, "Oh my God, am I going to do justice to it?" Because this isn't my genre. This isn't something that I usually read. But I was completely surprised by the fact that it held my interest. And I read through the book, and I really enjoyed it, because somewhere I think it also evoked the feelings that I've had, the thoughts that I've had in the course of my life, across various circumstances, and what I used to think. And those were captured in this book, and those made me relate to this book. And that's what made me read this book from the beginning to the end. He's absolutely right in the sense that when an author sits down to write the book, he doesn't know what is going to happen to that book. He only has a vague idea in his mind, or a little more than a vague idea in his mind, and then it flows through. I write a book with only knowing that this is the beginning, that is the end, and I have somehow to reach there. I don't know how. Now this is, I don't know if you followed the same process of saying, this is how I would want Chinma and Nithya to meet in the end, and then therefore...
That came about very slowly. Anyway, Vadhanji, I think your next book is going to be a slow thriller.
Actually, it isn't. It's making that maybe one after that.
Yeah, no, I mean, because the structure of the book is episodic, as I said, I mean, there are certain things I wrote not knowing where they will come in the novel, at which point. So 4 or 5 episodes were written that way. And while I was working on that, I had a sense that, yes, you could take this forward and they could meet at some point in the end. But that didn't come to me in the beginning. I mean, one question I'm asked all the time is, how come you wrote your first novel when you're 70 years old? Okay. To which the answer is, I've been thinking about it for 70 years.
Good answer. Good answer.
Even better answer is, my first words were not mama or dada. They were, all stray dogs go to heaven. Anyway.
And I don't think we want to reveal the secret of who you mean the stray dogs are. We will leave it to the book.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I think people who adopt stray dogs will be bitterly disappointed because it doesn't have much to do with. But there are stray dogs, real stray dogs in the novel, and they play an important part in certain sections of the book, but it's not really about stray dogs.
So then the next question that I have for you is, really, are you an avid reader? And if you are, who are your favorite authors?
Gosh, I knew that question would have to be answered at some point. I mean, the thing about books and reading is that you wander into a bookshop and you buy a certain book and you take it home. But you might not read it at that particular time in your life. The strange thing is, you have a lot of books that you've bought over the years and they're there on your bookshelf. And then suddenly one day, maybe 5 years, 6 years, 10 years later, you just walk straight to that bookshelf and you pull out a book that you bought nearly 5 years ago and you start reading it. That to me is a great mystery. I know, why do you do that? But that's because all those books on your shelf are reflections of the person that you are. And they reflect some part of you, and that's why you bought those books. But when you read them, you can't predict that. It's something that, since they are your books, you go to it when the mood dictates that you do so. The other thing I wanted to say about advancing the book through feelings is, I think a very important facet of any book is the mood. I mean, the great Japanese writers the great Japanese filmmakers whom I admire a great deal, they concentrate more on mood than anything else. And it's a very difficult thing to do. It doesn't come easily to Western writers because, and if you look at the movies of Western directors, they all cut on the action. A person gets up, the film cuts and moves to some other location. Whereas the Japanese never do that. At least a lot of the Japanese I admire, they cut because the mood dictates that you now move to something else. And it's not an easy thing to do. It's a very subtle sense of how to move from one location to the next, or how to move from one person to the next.
And he really hasn't answered my question, has he? He's asking, what is the question? The question is, are you an avid reader? And who are the authors that you probably prefer?
One of the first books that I received as a child when I was 8 or 9 years old was a book called the Ramayana and the Mahabharata in verse by Ramesh Chandra Dutt. And my parents gave that to me. And I still remember my mother reading out that book to me as a child. And it was in rhymed couplets. And it wasn't easy, but the stories themselves were so exciting. It's most of the Ramayana and the Mahabharata are told in rhymed couplets. It was absolutely fascinating. I still have that book with me after nearly 50 or 55 years. So that was one. I suppose I spent the early part of my childhood reading, like everybody else does, a bit of Enid Blyton. 5 Go to Smuggler's Stop, The Valley of Adventure. But my life was going on at a very sedate pace, very routine, when suddenly my life changed. I was living in Madras at the time, and a cousin of my father's, I think he was a nephew or a cousin, came to live with us, and he occupied one wing of the house. And I came back from school one day, and there was his luggage, and there were lots of cartons saying books, books, books. And so one day when he was at work, I wandered into his rooms, and there on the bookshelf were about 20 books of Earl Stanley Gardner, Perry Mason, and they had titles like The Case of the Cautious Coquette, The Case of the Vagabond Virgin. And I was thinking, my God, this sounds exciting. And of course, this cousin of my father's, whose name was Gopi, didn't realize it, but he inculcated the habit of reading a dictionary because I was determined to find out what coquette meant, what vagabond meant, and of course, what virgin meant. So my whole life changed. And then there was another series of books by somebody, I don't think anybody reads him anymore. He was somebody called Carter Brown. Carter Brown was somebody who was an Australian, and he based all his books in Los Angeles. They were thrillers, and they were just about 120 or 130 pages each. And they had titles like Kill Me Anytime Next Tuesday, or The Sad-Eyed Seductress. fascinating names like that. And as I said, I intended to find out what does seductress mean. So that's when I started cultivating the habit of consulting dictionaries. So that was, and so it was goodbye Enid Blyton. I never looked back after that. And life went on, and of course I read a great deal of Sherlock Holmes. And I'm still, I still think of that one story I read which terrified me as a child. It was called The Speckled Band. I don't know whether and it was about, this man who lives in a country house who wants to kill his niece, I think it is, or his stepdaughter. And he trains this adder, this poisonous snake, which comes in through a hole in the wall right on top and slides down the bell pull. And obviously with the intention of killing the girl who's right next to it. And of course, Sherlock Holmes and Watson are right there in the room, and they strike it down, and it runs up through the bell pull. All that was it. Kills the man himself. I mean, yeah, it becomes a bit of a Hindi movie towards the end, but it's okay.
So Sherlock Holmes are Hindi movies presented better. But what you have to understand about Sherlock Holmes or Hercule Poirot or anybody else is that what you read the book for is not the story. Yeah, the story gives you a thrill. Story it takes you through these unexpected turns and twists and etc. and so forth. You read the book for the character. And I am a strong believer of the fact that your characters drive your books. And if you don't build strong characters, then wow, however good your story is, your novel will have that kind of, won't get that kind of interest.
What I wanted to say, I'm glad you brought up that word character, because I've often wondered, what do people mean when they say, oh, she's a real character, or he's a real character? I mean, what exactly do they mean? Do they mean that these people belong not in real life, but in novels or in films? Because they are characters. Aren't ordinary people characters? I mean, what makes a character a character? I mean, that's one of the things that I explore in a way in the book, because all the people in the book are real people, but they're also characters in a sense of, the way people say, oh, he's a character. Because they do, abnormal or out of the way things. But I don't think we should pay too much attention to that, because for me, very normal people are also characters. I mean, a character doesn't have to do strange and abnormal things to be a character.
It doesn't have to be larger than life.
It doesn't have to be larger than life. It has to be believable. It has to be somebody that you either start to like or dislike, or somebody you want to laugh at or laugh with. That's what makes the character important. And when you then weave your story around these characters, then the story becomes all the more interesting, because you start identifying yourself with the characters. There's my last book, it's called The Vimana Transcripts. I wrote about this Russian character. Now this Russian characters, when you have a character who's a Russian character in a movie, it's easy because he has to have a Russian accent, right? But when you're writing a book with a Russian character, he has to, the author also has to convince the reader that he's reading what a Russian's saying, the way in which he says it. And that's important, and that's when you start identifying that character as of that nationality. So American is easy. It's the easiest. But Russian is a little difficult. If you want to use German, and what's the difference between a Russian character and a German character? How do they speak differently is important. And there are a lot of my readers who came back and came back and told me that, wow, my favorite character in the book was Russian, because at one point of time he's a villain, another point of time he makes you laugh. I had this feeling that I was actually hearing the Russian when he was speaking. I mean, in Russian, the accent of a Russian. So that's important, and that made that character very unique, right? So how you develop characters and how you weave these stories around the characters is very important. I love Nitya. I love so many characters in this book and some of the stray dogs as well, and the state in which they are depicted. There's one stray dog that's dying, and somebody goes and so and that evokes a lot of feelings in one of the other characters, and it's brilliant. It's brilliant the way in which he has made you identify with the characters. How much of an effort was it for you?
I really don't know how to answer that question because it's, I mean, you think of a character and you begin to develop that character. And the thing about writing or painting or any of the arts is that they're very portable. You can carry it around with you in your head. And so you're always thinking about it, although you're not consciously thinking about it. It's there at the back of your head. And then you might be having a conversation with people, but there's something kind of chittering along at the back of your head, you know. And the strange thing is that everything that you read or see or observe somehow connects back with the book that you're writing. I mean, that's a very strange thing. And you're consciously or unconsciously sifting what you observe and taking little bits and pieces. You're like a little magpie, you know, pecking at things and bringing them back home to the novel or to the dance or to the music or whatever it is that you're working on. So it's a slow process. I mean, the word I'd like to use is accumulation. It's a process of accumulation. And I think that's the effect that I want the reader to be left with at the end of the book. I mean, this sense of all these little things that he or she has read somehow accumulating and leaving an impression.
Wonderful. Please.
Person who is an author like you. I mean, I know that you are in the middle of a book, and that when you meet somebody like you meet me or you meet this lady here, so are you really consciously trying to grab that character, or are you trying to? Is it a conscious effort, or it's just people? You know, you have many people coming across, and you are imbibing that, and you're going to be using it somewhere, or is it a conscious effort? You know.
No, it's not conscious at all. It's not conscious at all. I mean, you are aware of everybody you're talking to and you carry on a normal conversation with them. But, you know, I mean, some people have a sense of observation. I mean, and that, you know, I mean, and things that people say or a gesture. I mean, very often it's not even what they say or what they do. It's just, it could be something very minimal, very small, like a gesture. Yeah, a way a person waves goodbye, or a way a person suddenly starts running, or a way somebody lifts his or her head to speak to you. It's all these little things, and that adds up. All of that adds up.
So my favorite place for observation is the airport. So in my professional capacity, I travel a lot. So I'm stuck in airports here and there, and I keep observing people. And it's so interesting that, you know, you can actually be almost about 40-50% or maybe even 60% right about a person just looking at the way he walks. Self-conscious walk, confident walk, overconfident walk. You know, a walk which has humility in it. Just by walking, and there are so many such things. You're absolutely right. There are so many such things that you have to observe. And I think as an artistic person, whether it is a writer or whether it's him as a writer or him as a filmmaker, right? as an artistic person, that level of observation will always be there. You must have accumulated over a period of time to observe, and that comes into the books, and that goes into yeah.
One question I have, Vadanji, is since you said this is a heavy book, you think it's a good idea to sell it at airports?
It's always good to sell any one of your books at the airports. Let me ask you, how many people actually go to a bookstore nowadays? You buy books on Amazon, or you buy books on a whim when you are at the airport. So whatever it is or whoever it is, my publisher is, I beg of them to please put up my books in the airports, and most of my books you'll find in the airports, because that's when people buy the most. The books are the most visible at the airports. That's strategic, that's not artistic. But let me tell you something, the art of writing is very interesting. The business of writing is extremely tough, extremely tough. You're a first time or so.
No, which brings me really to the whole idea of what to publish and how things are published. I think I have to say that a lot of publishers think more about the category in which the book has to be put. I mean, obviously, I don't qualify for young adult fiction. No, that's not. I'm not going to or historical romance. The thing is, if you talk about publishing in India, it's mostly textbooks. A large percentage of books published in India are textbooks, and then there's a whole lot of regional publishing. But I think when publishing, and literary fiction is a very, very small percentage of publishing in India. So I think publishers would be well served if they think more about literary fiction that's published abroad and pitch your book and compare it to what's going on internationally. And that's the way to do it, because, and I think BluOne Inc. has done a fantastic job of publishing this book, which is more than 500 pages long. A lot of appointments that I kept with editors and publishers, the first question was, this is a really long book. I mean, can you cut it down? I mean, why don't we read the book to begin with, for God's sakes, and then make that decision of how to cut it down or whether it should be cut down. But just to kind of go, just talk point blank about, yes, we can't publish it because it's too long. I think publishers have to find this balance. Publishers have to find this balance between commercial considerations on the one hand and the literary merit of the actual novel, and that's the only way to go about it, because otherwise you will be very limited in what you publish. And I must say once again that BluOne Inc. has done a fantastic job publishing this book.
I believe that the publishing in this country, publishers abroad market their authors, irrespective of whether they are the first-time authors or published authors, or even the best-selling authors. They are marketed. In India, publishing is like running a betting in a race course, right? Where your publisher will publish 100 books. And one out of that 100 will become a bestseller, and he doesn't care about the rest of the 99 books, right? So what he's doing here is that the cost of the 99 books is recovered from the one book that has become a bestseller. So therefore, it becomes a mass product thing. There is no real consideration given in terms of the literary value of the book, etc. and so forth. And your arguments absolutely resonate with me, in the sense that when I first went to a publisher with a book which is about 300, 400 pages, he said, "You're a first-time author. Please write a book which is about 150 pages. And then otherwise nobody will buy your book." How does the reader know whether I'm a first-time author or not? How does he know? He's going to pick up the book, he's going to read it. Oh, this guy's a first-time author. It's printed on the cover. Oh, I'm not going to read the book if it's more than 150 words. That's nonsense. So that whole argument is, is farcical. But then that's the way it is.
Krishna, you've lived away from Kerala for a long time now. Does it help for a writer the view of a city or a region, does it change considerably, or are you able to form a more objective view and write your stories by being outside of a city? Have you read any other literature coming out of Kerala, and how do you see, if you compare the kind of views, the worldview you have of that region or state?
No, I must confess that I haven't read much writing from Kerala in English. I haven't. But talking about, this is a question that I get asked a lot of the time. Since you haven't lived in Kerala for any length of time, how is it that you've managed to convey a sense of matriarchal family life in Kerala? The answer to that question is, children have a wonderful sense of observation. And I went back every year for many, many years as a child to our family house in Kerala. And at some point, I think all that I heard and saw and observed has really sunk in a way, And many, many years later, it's come up to the surface, and it wasn't a problem at all writing about it, because the images were very clear in my mind. They were not in words, they were in images. People walking from one end of a corridor to another, people taking a bath in the family tank, people plucking mangoes. These are images that stay with you as a child. The other part of your question is, yes. No, not at all. Not at all. I live in America, but with a face like this, nobody will mistake me for an American. I think Indians have a very kind of Indians are mental acrobats. They can live they live in many cultures simultaneously, and yes, they can retain an Indianness, and of course that's a huge question. What is Indianness? And we won't get into that. Each person has his or her own sense of what that really is, or what that means, but we all carry within ourselves our own sense of what it means to be Indian, which might not be yours or anybody else's sense of what it means to be Indian. I don't believe that there is, one broad thing which makes us all Indian. I think each of us have to come to terms with it in our own way. So I don't think living abroad has affected that at all. No.
Do you have any plans of writing another book? And if yes, would this be a continuation of this one, or would you write something afresh?
I have a heart, Vadhan. This took me 70 years. I won't be, if it takes me another 70, I don't think I'll be around. But yes, I have plans, but so does everybody. So let's see how far those plans go. Yes.
We can open the session now for Q&A. Or any audience member who has a question can ask him directly.
Namaste, sir. As you have written a big book, this is, as you said, it is 70 years you have taken to write this book. But what I understand in writing, that thoughts come and go. So you have to trap them then and there and then accumulate them. That's what you said it, and then you have to serialize it. So did it go in that manner?
So, like Wordsworth said about poetry, you know, it's a. I think the way it went is it's a spontaneous overflow of powerful emotions recollected during tranquility. So that's how poetry comes out. And he's also a poet. He's also written poetries and which is published poetry in the US, I think.
You're absolutely right. Some thoughts occur to you only once in a lifetime. And that's, you know, it's very strange when you think about it. They just come and go. And if you don't remember it or write it down or think about it, it goes away. It dissolves, it goes away. And sometimes it never comes back. It never comes back. And that, I think, is the charm and the danger of being a human being, isn't it? I mean, things come to us and they slip away from us.
And I normally write couplets of shairi. So many a times it happens that I get up from my bed and go to bathroom and then thinking that okay, that was a good thing. The moment I come back and I want to recollect it, and it goes out, vanishes for once for all. And then I have to think another thing.
Sir, you have been a teacher, and Kunal has often spoken to me what a phenomenal influence you have been on his life, and his writing owes a lot to you. I'd like to know how you feel as a teacher, and what does it take to learn to write?
I was very young when I went to teach at the Doon School in Dehradun. And I must have been about 22 or 23 years old. And I was a child myself in many ways at that time. And I think I learned a lot from the kids that I was teaching. I mean, you're unconscious of it, but you learn from them just as they learn from you. And so it was actually a give and take. I mean, and since I was young, I threw myself into everything and absorbed everything. And that, I think, in a strange way, helped me become a better teacher. Because if I went back to teach, you know, at 50 or 60, I would never be the same teacher. You know, there is a time, I don't know, I mean, it comes back to the question of talking of books. Should you read certain books at a certain time in your life? You know, it's an interesting question. I mean, you read a book when you're 22 years old, but if you read it again when you're 50 or 60, you know, sometimes you look at what you've underlined when you were 20 years old and you think, my God, I mean, what was I thinking of then? You know? And so coming back to being a teacher, I think it was a very formative period in my life because it was the first time when I had the time to read and teach. And I did a lot of reading at that time in my life. So yes, it was important.
Yes, as KK says, we used to call him in school KK. And frankly, they were very good teachers in school, but I really feel that, you know, I used to look forward to his classes. And that is saying much, you know. I mean, nobody does look forward to any classes. It's only lunchtime or breakout time that look for. It's a boarding school, by the way. Yeah. So, you know, but his classes were great fun. His way to teach Shakespeare, oh, I didn't know there were so many other meanings to it. Seriously. And the way he taught us Shakespeare, I remember Alan Paton, Thomas Hardy. Wow. I mean, the students don't do books anymore, no literature in school nowadays. But that lives with me, you know. And then he took the pains to get those movies into town. We saw those movies, Romeo and Juliet, in Dehradun Hall. I mean, where would you imagine they would put in, you know, Romeo and Juliet? And we had this Thomas Far from the Madding Crowd. Yeah, amazing. So, you know, it was a wonderful experience with him. And as a person, he's been superb, you know. So I really say that. And Kunal, you mentioned Kunal. Kunal was with us. And, well, he was a different breed altogether. He's an author now. And I remember KK was running a magazine there known as Fag, I think, yeah, Fag. And he got volunteers, and Mr. Kunal Verma definitely, first volunteer. And I can't forget that interview, which KK just kind of asked him. He said, "What do you like doing?" So he says he's all of 14 or 15 years old at that time. So he says deep sea hunting and big game, big game hunting and deep sea fishing, that sort of, yeah. So he said, "You are on." Anybody having wild dreams and thoughts and all that. We had a wonderful time, I would say that for him. Yes, definitely. So, and he was young, yeah. I didn't know you were just 22. Wow, super.
We had other English masters as well who would give us assignments like essays. And they would give you standard topics for essays, but KK's topic, for example, would be biting into a juicy apple. That's an essay assignment you have to do over the weekend. Or something like trees.
And that makes it all the more interesting.
Yeah. I mean, who would think of such a, we really looked up to him. He was someone totally different from the rest.
We have gotten some questions as well, which is also my question, which is why this title? I have seen some videos of yours where you say if I had to give a more postmodernist title, I would call it a biryani. So we'd like to know more why this title, and if had this not been the title and not also biryani, what could it have been?
Don't you think biryani is a good title?
That is an amazing title.
Considering the huge amounts of biryani consumed in this country. I think it's an amazing title. Anyway, the stray dogs of the title, as Vadhan just said, are actually the characters in the book who are, who wander the streets, not of any city, but of their own imaginations. That's why they are stray dogs. And what they're looking for is not food or bones. They're looking for scraps of real emotion. That's what they're sniffing for. Some of them find it, some of them don't. But they have to live with the consequences of what they find. Yeah. And everybody in the book, I mean, they're stray dogs also because one important, don't believe everything I say, read the book, but I think an important element in the book, an important symbol in the book, it's a symbol of a house and what a house represents. The dreams of the man or the woman who built the house and what happens to the house over a period of time, who inherits it, how they look after it, and what happens to the dreams of the person who actually built it. And also the dreams of people who want to have a house of their own, but that idea is so elusive and they can't have it, although they fight all their lives for the simple right of having a house of their own, which is denied them. So that's part of it also. I mean, so they're also stray dogs, although they have a roof over their heads. But as a character in the novel says, they don't have a roof over their feelings, even though they have a roof over their heads.
So, sir, just wanted to know that it took you 70 years to write this book. So what inspired you in particular to write this story, if you can pinpoint something?
I think I carried bits and pieces of the story with me over the years. It didn't all suddenly come together. I mean, there are small bits of the story which I've carried with me over the years, over many years. And those are the bits I wrote first, because those were episodes, little incidents. And then it was a question of how to find the link between these various incidents, between these various episodes. And like any author will tell you, I mean, you have ideas for your author, for your characters, but they simply take over and run away with it. And so you follow them and see where it takes them. And that's the link that connects them.
You had no problem killing so many people. And I just want to know, have you thought about us as readers, what a roller coaster ride it was for us? And why so many deaths?
Some characters just ask to be killed, so they're begging for it, they deserve it. So that was easy. Why so many deaths? Why? Because death comes in strange ways to people. It comes often sometimes. It comes in strange guises, in strange disguises. A lot of people in the novel might be alive, and yet they are morally and emotionally dead. So I mean, so death is, yes, physical death comes to everybody, but there are several people in the novel who are emotionally not alive, and that's I mean, Nitya, who's the main character in the book, he goes to a Theyyam. A Theyyam is a performance in Kerala. It's a ritual performance of dance and mime and music, where you exalt the spirits of ancestors. You know, it's a Theyyam. And Nitya is told at one of these Theyyams that you're a person who has forgotten to live. So what does that mean? He doesn't know what it means. And part of the book is an exploration of what that means. And at some point he realizes that he's forgotten to live because he doesn't know how to love. He doesn't know how to open his heart to other people. And once he begins to do that, he realizes that yes, he has begun to live again.
Just an observation. If so many people in the novel, in the book, didn't die, how will they go to heaven? And this book is about all the stray dogs that go to heaven.
A follow-up question to that only. Do you know before you create a character and start writing about it that this person will die? Or is it a journey? Is it a surprise for you as well as a writer?
I really don't know what the fate of a character is, because I mean, there is a kind of an arc in the way a character travels through the novel, and sometimes because of things that happen to him or her, you know, it's not fair to make them live and suffer. It's best that they disappear. But it's not quite killing them. It's a way of admitting that this is the way it is. I mean, if you look at the life of this particular person, there was no other way in which he or she could have been saved.
I think we are done with questions. This was a really fun and engaging session, Vadhanji and Krishnaji. Thank you, audience, for being part of this event. Sir, I would request you to please stay here. We'll have few pictures with you both. And we'll also request the author to stay for book signings if anybody wants to get it signed. Thank you, everyone.